OK, this is also known as the Great Repeal Bill. This is, Iain Duncan Smith, the biggest power grab by a government in generations.
Well, not really. I mean, if you look at the existing European legislation, you'll find that there's a thing called Schedule 2 to the 1917 European Communities Act, mean nothing to the public watching it, but that actually authorises any government for the last 40 years to take any rules, regulations from the European Union and make them into UK law without any reference to Parliament. It even allows them to go further than this bill and do it by decree. Now, for 40 years, we've had not a single question mark over that power that government has held. This bill
Has the government ever employed it, though? Has the government ever used it?
Yes, endlessly. Every regulation is often bypasses, most regulations bypass Parliament almost completely. So for 40 years, the power of the government as a result of the European legislation has been enormous.
Why bother with Parliament at all, then?
Well, exactly what's been going on. So the key question here is, what is this about? This is not about the negotiations. So all that's happening is these so-called Henry VIII powers are really about saying, look, some of that legislation which exists and embedded here in the UK will have to have a certain amount of moving and fiddling with it and, you know, a lot of sort of legal technicalities that needs to be done in quite a hurry to get it done. Okay. And that's about saying, look, if everything comes to the floor of the House, this will take an age to do.
Yeah.
So let's do that on the guarantees of it. And that's really the point. But government will still be overseen by the
Why
Parliament.
should you, as democratically elected MPs, look at every single piece of legislation and scrutinise it before it's...
Why shouldn't we?
Well, why should you? So, I mean, Iain Duncan Smith saying you don't need to.
Time is of the essence as well, isn't it?
Well, look, there's two things. First of all, it's wrong to say that we haven't been properly scrutinising EU legislation. The irony is the kind of scrutiniser-in-chief, the chairman of the EU Scrutiny Committee, is none other than a leading Brexiteer called Bill Cash. And that committee that he leads, the EU Scrutiny Committee, has looks at all the stuff coming out of Europe on Parliament's behalf, scrutinises it, judges what it's doing. Now, the problem with this repeal bill, I think, in terms of the principle of transposing all the EU rules we need for our system to be able to function going forward into UK law makes sense. Yep. But the problem is, this goes back to the point I've been making about Brexit. Brexit, in the terms that it was sold to your viewers, is proving impossible to deliver. We are looking at something like 10,000 plus pieces of legislation, secondary legislation, that will need to be implemented in a very small time frame in order to get Brexit through.
That hasn't
and
changed,
don't forget, well, don't forget, the issue,
new.
Ben, is that we were told, Iain was one of them, that this is going to be easy. You know, when he was going around that big fat red bus with a £350 million per week? You know, this is going to be a very straightforward process. It's going to be really easy to do, and actually it's proving damn difficult.
Well, that's the whole point about this bill. The bill is to make this as smooth as possible, and that's all this is.
By giving huge powers
but
to ministers to do what they want.
The government has absolutely guaranteed, and the Parliament will be able to check this. You talked about Bill Cash's committee. He will be able to look at everything the government's doing at the same time. And the key thing is the government has said, we're not changing any of these rules. All we're doing is transposing them.
So take
workers' rights are guaranteed.
And give all the power to ministers.
And it's time limited. At the end of this process, those powers drop.
But you talk about trying to make it easier. We've been sold the idea of being easy. Jeremy Corbyn's ordering the Labour MPs to vote down the Brexit bill next week. So that's not going to make it easy in any way. So it's going to make it even more complicated, isn't it?
Because we don't think you should hand giant powers to ministers to determine everything, because they want, with little scrutiny, powers by decree. This is not what we want.
Do you think that every Labour MP agrees with you, or do you think there will be some MPs who represent Leave constituencies where voters are going, I don't understand what you're all worried about. We voted to take back control. This is about taking back control. How on earth are you even thinking about holding this up?
Well, because the control is going to ministers, and I don't think it is a problem.
It's going to UK government.
Well, hang on just a minute. I don't think people will have a problem with the constitutional argument about, is it right that we should be giving huge powers to ministers? That's quite a separate thing from whether or not we leave the European Union and how we do it. And I think for people who are representing Leave constituencies, their constituents who voted to leave, their concern is that this thing gets done. I don't think they're going to be too obsessed necessarily with the constitutional niceties, partly because that's a job for their MP.
Yeah, OK.